little bit more about the Anthropocene? Is it giving a name to this period, just like people do to other large periods of time that represent maybe an extinction or something like that?
Yeah. Well, that's a good way of putting it, really. Yeah. It's actually another way of speaking it. Several authors have described it as the Great Acceleration, during which the socioeconomic and Earth system trends are increasing dramatically, especially after the Second World War. And the Geological Society cites the year as 1945 as being the beginning of the Great Acceleration. I suppose almost, a sense of it being almost exponential acceleration, and needing, really, in a way, needing to find some sort of sense of relationship with it in terms of what we value. Yeah. So, yeah.
I wonder if that might be a good place to ask about the ecological self then, because as you're talking, I'm thinking you're talking in these like really broad brushstrokes about things that I feel like I'm swept up inside of, but I have no power or control over, right? That I'm just this tiny little piece in this grand story that you're telling. And so I start to wonder then, where is my place in that? And so you have a term about the ecological self, and I wonder if it relates to that.
Yeah. Yes, in preparing for this, I was thinking of ways of describing it, and I'm quite excited to consider the relationship. Well, okay, the first time I think I came across it in the literature was from the deep ecologist Arne Ness, who I think was responsible for coining that phrase, and certainly Joanna Macy's used it in her more recent work on the Great Turning, and I was thinking how, as a correlation, really, the way in the recent interest we've had in the ACT learning community about specifically naming and bringing compassion into our work, and how, in order to help us do that, we've worked on developing a relationship with our compassionate selves, and thence, or henceforth from there, we have then learned to appreciate the value of self-compassion. And I suspect that we will need to do something similar in order to fully get in touch with our ecological valuing. We will need to do it from the perspective of our ecological self. I think a phrase that I've used previously that I really enjoyed from John Seed, who was a lifelong kind of protector of the rainforests in a way, when asked what sustained his work. He came up with something along the lines of, well, I do this not because I'm protecting the rainforest, but because I am that part of the rainforest that is noticed it needs to take care of itself. And that, I think, that gives a sense of an ownership, a sense of ownership of the problem. In a way, in our work with our clients, we develop a sense of contextual self, neti, from the Hindu practice, not this, not that, not the other. So a sort of a non-identified place. And yet from there, we're invited to drop into the 10 traditional identities, the valued living realms, to feel into our passion and find our small self's values. So we're invited to drop in and identify with ourselves as a parent, and then find our parental values, and identify with ourselves as a lover, and to know what our values are in the realm of intimate life. And I suggest that the ecological self is actually the almost like the identified contextual self. So it's a sense of dropping in. The contextual self that we work with is really the ecological self is the context from which and within which we are spawned. You know, as earthlings, we are of the earth, and the ecological self feels that and knows that, and from that place we find our ecological values. So a quote that helped me, and this is a much loved quote from Nisargadatta Maharaj. Don't suppose I've pronounced that exactly right, but wisdom tells me I am nothing, and there we have contextual self. Love tells me I'm everything, and there I suggest is the ecological self. And between the two, my life flows. Yeah, it excites me because it also links. For me, with the bodhisattva ideal, that sense of a universal compassion, really, our concern for all sentient life. And as I was sort of putting together some ideas for this, I've wrote feeling passionately into our concern for all sentient life, bodhisattva-like, and intending to steer the evolutionary impulse, brackets of which we're both product, observer, and potential agent, in the direction of an ever greater awareness of itself. So again, probably kind of big ideas, but a big agenda, and a vastly increased circle of compassion, perhaps related to the contextual self.
I think it's quite interesting what you're proposing and suggesting for the ecological self, and am also drawn to it, feel fascinated by this idea of dropping into a sense of self that is nature itself, and being a part of that process. If I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, is that we are not separate from the rainforest. We are not separate from, you know, the earth that we walk upon. And so what will be the way in which we'll participate in that non-separation?